Hi, I'm Jim,
And I'm Kevin,
and we are.
the Signal Brothers. Hey, we really do appreciate you coming back. Happy New Year to everybody, and welcome to another live edition of the Signal Brothers. Just a reminder, we do this live, right? This is unfiltered, this is not edited, and we never know what Jim or Kevin are going to say. So it's all out of control. So, hey, just a reminder, just a few things about our podcast. I said all opinions that we express in this podcast are solely Jim's and mine, right? It doesn't reflect our employers or our family. And hey, during the podcast, we love to take questions about the subjects we're covering. So, if there's something that we're covering and you got a question, pop it in the chat. And just as soon as we're finishing a thought, we'll monitor the chat, and we love answering the questions. Let us know what you're passionate about. And if you'd like to be on the podcast, let us know. We'd love to get you on here. We'd love to interview you. And even if your opinion doesn't agree with Jim and I, we'd still love to have you, right? The best information we get is the opinion we don't agree with, right?
Yep.
And even if you don't want to be on the podcast and you got a great idea for a subject, put it in the chat. We'll research it, and more than likely we'd love to cover it.
It doesn't necessarily have to be political or anything like that. It could be anything.
Anything. We'll cover anything, right? So with no further ado, I'd like to introduce our guest today, John Mcconnell, who is the host of the Military Retirement Podcast. Welcome, John.
Welcome,
Hey,
John.
Kevin. Hey, Jim. Hey, Kevin. How's it going?
Going well. Going well. Glad to have you.
Thanks, man. I appreciate you guys reaching out. And I know Kevin and myself have a deep history going back many, many moons. But yeah, really appreciate it and love supporting and love being here. Hopefully some people will see it on my channel as that it's broadcasting there live as well. So maybe we'll get some comments and some awesome interactions today. We'll see what happens.
Awesome.
Cool. Well, John, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your podcast?
Yeah. Been out of the military for a few years. I did a total of 25 years in the United States Army. Came in as a E3, I believe, E2, E3, because I had a little bit of college under my belt before I got in. So got picked on a lot when I was in basic training, of course, for that. But yeah, it was a great run. I did a lot of things, all things signal the whole time. Started off as a radio transmission communications specialist, worked my way up through, found out about the 74 Bravo, 25 Bravo path somewhere along the lines, and started to try to chip away at that by doing certifications and working with G6 and stuff like that. Got really deep into computers, ended up coming off of active duty after my first 6 years. And that's basically where I met Kevin at the over there in Schwetzingen, Germany, doing some reserve time. Worked in that unit for a good 5 or 6 years, deployed with them once downrange, came back, and then got the wonderful opportunity to become a warrant officer. Took that and ran with it. Went back to the States, came back on active duty as an AGR, so Active Guard Reserve, for those who don't know. Basically, you're active duty, Title 10, you're working with a reserve unit. You're doing all the grunt work during the week, and then on the weekends, everybody comes in, has barbecue and parties, and then they go away, and you're stuck there with the rest of the unit doing the work. So, yeah, did that. Got to a point where I was about 3 or 4 years out, and I think if you don't remember, Kevin, we had a conversation about it. I had a conversation with a couple other folks about it, but I remember specifically our conversation, and it was like I think it kind of went something like, yeah, I can't do this shit anymore. This is stupid. I don't want to do it. And you were like, look, just come back off the ledge. It's okay. It'll be fine. You know, gave me some words of advice. And luckily I took those words of advice and went ahead and retired. And in the end of my career, right around the end, right before I retired, I decided to start doing YouTube. And do a channel and try to do like a vlog where I can take the camera and hold it up and talk to it and tell people about what I'm actually doing. I'm going through CIF, or I'm doing paperwork, or I just got my 214. Unfortunately, I didn't have the discipline or the kind of muscle memory to be able to do that constantly. Slowly, you get to learn how to do that over time if you're not used to it. But it took me a little while to get into it. And then at some point, I decided to flip the camera around and make it about everybody else, make it about the veterans, make it about the people who are going through retirement struggles, who have been out a few years, who maybe have lost touch with community or lost touch with their purpose. So basically, that's what it morphed into. At some point, I got a co-host along the way, a retired warrant officer as well from the United States Marine Corps. And we've been doing it for a couple of years, been loving every minute of it, never get bored of it. Love helping veterans out, love hearing their stories, and love answering questions, and love providing them with as much resources as we can provide them with so they can be successful on their way out of the military.
So John, you're right. A lot of us, not just yourself, when I gave you advice about, sticking it out and staying in the military, I had the same mentors telling me the same thing. And so I'd be curious, as you're doing a lot of interviews of folks, about military retirement. Have you seen that a common denominator across the folks you've been interviewing?
Yeah, I wouldn't say a common denominator, but I know there's definitely a lot, and I still have conversations literally like last week, probably had some conversations with folks through Facebook and other media forms. I stay very active in a lot of these groups. We have our own group, the Military Retirement Group, which is about almost 3,000 strong right now. And it's just a really good community of folks who get together and get to talk openly, and nobody's throwing mud and nobody's, slinging their whatever they're trying to sell. It's just really good conversations. So I stay in these conversations, and usually the conversation is something like, hey, I've got 2 or 3 years left, or I just dropped my retirement paper, and now what do I do? Where they've got a little bit of runway before they get out, and they're just trying to figure out like what is the sequence of events that they have to go through in order to be able to successfully get to retirement. And a lot of times it's really just that, like, uncertainty, of course, because you don't know what you're doing. And then if you're asking folks around you who haven't retired, like your colonel or your captain or your CO or whoever it is, or your master sergeant or, sergeant major, or whoever that happens to be, they don't know what the hell they're talking about because they've never retired either. So they're going to tell you what they think is right based on what they see from the inside. What we try to do is give the perspective from the outside of like, hey, we've been out for 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, or we interview somebody who's been out for 10 years and give somebody a perspective of what that potentially looks like, 5 or 10 years down the road for them. Not to stress, take it easy. It's kind of funny because at that time, I know I was stressing out because I was trying to get back to see my kids. I was really dealing with a lot of stuff, going through the divorce prior to that, and just trying to figure things out. And that wasn't even, I was 4 or 5 years from retirement. Right. So, and I like to tell people in the same breath, like, if you're thinking about retiring, like at 5 years, you should already start thinking about like, what do I want to do? Where do I want to be relocated to? What job do I want to take afterwards? If I want to take a job, what am I going to fill my time with once I get out? It's good to start at least thinking about that stuff 5 or 6 years out. So when you get to that point, it's not so stressful to go through all the checklists and all the stuff and the TAP and everything you got to do.
So what drove you to start this podcast, John? What was the driving factor?
I felt like when I was getting to retirement and going through the process, I actually went to the TAP office like 2 years and 1 day from my retirement window, and they turned me around that first day that I went there because they're like, nope, you have to be exactly 2 years to be able to come in here and start doing TAP classes. So, but through that last 2 years, I felt like there was a lot of things that you just didn't get information about. Or if you went through TAP, and again, I went through when it was COVID, so it was a little weird. But even then, I talked to folks today who go through TAP today, and they say the same thing. They're like, it's a fire hose. It's a whole bunch of information. They give you all this stuff. It's a bunch of, people who aren't really in the industry talking about the industry, aren't really in finance talking about finance. and those kind of things. And I felt like there wasn't enough information out there. Like there's some resources that we've come over just in the last 6 months or a year that have been tremendous. Like if I had those resources back then, right? If I could just rewind the clock and have those same resources, I probably would have been 10 steps ahead of where I am now in my retirement process, which is, 3 or 4 or 5 years out from when I actually retired. So I feel like just being able to find good resources, give people good information, point them in the right directions, whether it's figuring out how to take space age travel, or figuring out how to do the BDD program, or figuring out how to get into SkillBridge, or any of that stuff. Like those are things that I wish people were there. I wish there was a channel or a show or a YouTube thing that I could have watched in that period that would have helped me out with that process. And maybe there was, but I just wasn't able to find it. So I figured I would start to do it on my own. And it started with that kind of vlog style, like, let me tell my story. And then, like I said, it evolved into, let me get with a bunch of veterans who have been in different services, whether Navy or Marines or Air Force or whatever, folks that are all the way up to, 2-star, 3-star level, master sergeants, E7s, people who got medically retired. There's a whole big, broad brush stroke of things that cover military retirement. And everybody, I think, kind of just sees that narrow bandwidth of like, do your 20, get out. There's a whole bunch of other different circumstances and situations where you'll fall into. And I feel like there's not enough information out there, or if the information is out there, the platform just isn't big enough to project that information out and get it into the right hands at the right time.
You're on your podcast as well. Is this, you also broadcast or talk about anything that helps people that, like myself, I didn't retire. I PCS'd after 6 years, and there was a lot going on for that. I can't even imagine a retirement. But is there anything you guys talk about that you talk about that help people like that? They're just looking to, get out before retirement.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of the resources that we talk about actually cross over both, right? And we kind of, the podcast, and it's hard to, you guys know, it's hard to figure out the name of the podcast, the name of the show, the logo, like what's your tagline, like what you want to be about. Because when I started everything, it was retire.army. That was my show. And I think when we did our interview on there, it was retire.army. So from that perspective, looking from the outside, it's like, oh, you're just talking about Army retirees. And I was like, no, I'm actually talking about all retirees, but I just named it retire.army because I happen to be Army and it was a unique name, right?
Mm-hmm.
We've gone through iterations of changing the channel and changing the name, but I feel like the resources, a lot of them overlap with not just retirees, but also folks who have been in for 4 years or been in for 10 years, and that midterm category in their career, and decide, oh, I want to get out, or they have to get medically transferred out, or something happens, somebody, God forbid, and the family passes away and they have to go home and take care of stuff, and they have to literally hang up the uniform to go do that in a lot of cases.
Right.
I feel like the resources that we have, we try to make it as much broad stroke to cover everybody who's getting out of the military, whether they're retiring or transitioning. At some point, we were going to call it the Military Retirement and Transition Podcast, and we just didn't, because transition is one of those trigger words for some reason. But and we could talk about that later. But I feel like the resources that we give out in about 80 to 90% of the cases are resources that anybody can use, whether you've retired or whether you've done 6 years and got out, or whatever the case may be. The only thing that wouldn't fall into that is like some of the actual like retirement benefits of drawing a pension, having the retiree ID card, having access to TRICARE, like those kind of things wouldn't be accessible to people who haven't done full retirement. But I think the rest of it kind of really covers it, whether it's VA benefits or anything like that. Like those things really are kind of universal.
Yeah, and we got somebody who gave a shout out. Hey, just want to shout out to Carter, who says hello, and we typed something back in the chat. Thanks for doing that, Jim. But let's give a shout out to Carter, who's listening in. Yeah, it's an interesting thing, because when I interviewed with you, John, I had a much different perspective, because I'm a reserve retired guy. right? In the gray area. I was in the gray area for 18 years, John. And I finally, just a few months ago, put in my retirement paperwork and am going through the actual reserve retirement process. So once I get through that and I start collecting, and I'd be interested in coming back and giving that experience to folks that are going through the gray area and about how to, process the paperwork and what I experienced through that process. Because, I went to the reserve retired back in 2007, and here we are in 2026, and I'm right around the corner from collecting. So I think it would be a good. I think there's a lot of folks out there that are in the gray area or spend a lot of time in the gray area and don't understand the process. And it was pretty lengthy to fill out all the paperwork and stuff. And if you're not really connected, like I think when you come off of active duty and you do have TAP, right? And even though it's a wealth of knowledge, John, when you're disconnected from the military for 18 plus years, and then you got to get re-engaged again to get that retirement check coming in, it's a whole different story. So I'd love to maybe sometime this summer I'll come visit you again and we'll go through that. So I remember when I interviewed with you, it was just you, and now it's you and Victor Delafleur. And can you tell us a little bit about how you and Victor met and how you both ended up co-hosting the Military Retirement Podcast?
Yeah, like I mentioned, when I started, it was Retired Army, and I really, really, really liked that name, but for obvious reasons, it had to get changed a little bit. I bumped into Victor, I guess it was online somewhere. I don't remember if I'd crossed his channel or something like that. I'm always constantly doing research as far as trying to find guests, trying to find interesting people, find nonprofits or companies or whoever that's actually helping veterans out. That's literally part of my daily routine. So I just ran across Vic. I reached out and I said, hey, I'm doing this thing. I do this podcast. And if you're interested, I'd love to sit down and talk with you sometime. Maybe you can come on the show. We did an interview, me and him, and I interviewed him basically for a couple hours. I think we split it into actually 2 episodes because it was so long. So from that, then we just kept on talking. We were texting each other back and forth. And eventually I was like, hey, I really want to kind of grow this thing and make it bigger. And I feel like bringing on a co-host would be a good way to do that. You've got different perspectives than I do. You've got different networks of people that that you can reach out to or reach out through. So between the two of us, once he came on, we continued to do the Retired Army thing for a little while. And then eventually, like I said, we changed the name so we can try to capture like everybody in the military, not just Army folks, and get a little bit wider cast of the net. But yeah, it was really just doing a lot of research every single day, going on LinkedIn every single day, searching YouTube every single day, going through Facebook every day, trying to find folks who are talking about veteran stuff, honestly and genuinely, and then just engaging with those folks, even on Twitter, now X. Just that's kind of my daily routine, is spend a lot of time out there. And that's how I ran across Vic. And that's how I've run across a ton of our guests as well. I tried to reach into my network and see like, who do I know and who can I reach out to? Funny enough, like not a lot of people wanted to come on and do the interview. Maybe some were still in service and getting ready to retire. Some were still working as government civilians, and they're like, oh, it's kind of iffy. And I'm like, it's just a podcast, man. I'm not trying to like corner you or put you in a headlock or anything. We're just talking about veteran stuff. But yeah, a lot of my time is spent doing that networking and reaching out and engaging with posts and people. And through that, found Vic, and he's a really, really good dude. He's one of my favorite humans right now. And I love spending time with him, and I wish we could be close enough where we could sit down in the same room. Maybe that'll happen, maybe never, but he's a really good human being, a great co-host, and he also does his own show, which is the Green Logbook, which is an excellent YouTube channel, growing and talking about veteran things. And we just kind of cross collaborate and cross over a lot of that information between the two channels. So
that's awesome.
So tell me, you're doing this. Is it therapeutic for you? I mean, you must be getting something out of it. When I talk about something get in, I mean, it must be healing for you, right? And if you could talk a little bit about how it's helped you.
I actually really miss the one-on-one conversations. Like I said, it's great having a co-host, but I felt like a lot of the one-on-one conversations were a lot more intimate. Like the conversation that we had, conversations that I've had with multiple guests throughout the year, a couple of years that we've been doing this. Yes, it's very therapeutic for me in the sense that I get this feeling of just being able to connect with somebody who understands what I've been through in the military, at least to some degree, and I understand what they've been through in the military. And we actually, especially when it's a one-on-one conversation, if I'm having a one-on-one interview with somebody, a lot of my questions are less about their military retirement and like all the details of every little checklist and piece of paper and things that they had to do to go through it, but more about how they felt through the process, what things they experienced that were ups and downs, that were emotionally challenging for them. I think one question that we used to ask was like, if you could go back in time and talk to your 16-year-old self, which is a very formative age, and not go back to give advice or give stock tips or anything like that, but just sit down and have a conversation with yourself at 16. Like, what would that conversation look like? Where would you be at? Would you be at your home? Would you be in some like secret hideout in the woods? And what that conversation would be like. And that question in and of itself has really dug up a lot of emotions in some of my guests, like to the point of like tears coming down and like
I can imagine.
really just emotionally just opening up to me. And for me, that when that moment happens, whether it's in that question or in another context, that I've unlocked that kind of emotional barricade that we put up in public, and be able to connect with somebody on that level, like that for me is the best part about doing any of the interviews that we do.
That's a really loaded question. I can see how that would bring out a lot of emotion. I know it did me just thinking about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
16.
that's what we try to do. We try to deeply connect with people emotionally, therapeutically. For me, like I said, it feels really good to be giving back to the community through these conversations, because I know people that watch it and listen, they'll get stuff out of it and they give us feedback in the form of a comment or something like that. Like, this really helped me out, or this specific thing, like I really resonate with this, and this really is something that I don't think most people understand about me, but this guy or this girl who you were talking to really understands that. I'm glad that you guys had this conversation about this. So that for me is super therapeutic.
That's awesome. That's really awesome. So I know aside from the podcast, you also have a private Facebook group. You want to talk a little bit about that and how that connects in with what you do with the podcast?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. I'm going to actually just pull it up on my screen so I'm not talking crazy. So we, Vic actually had the Facebook group started. And at that point, it was pretty small, pretty tight knit. Like I said, Vic is very business oriented. He's good at hunting down people for sponsorships, and he's good at building communities. Really good at it. So he brings a lot of stuff to the table that I don't possess as character traits that I don't possess, and I'm not able to build communities like he can build communities. But then my interviewing skills, on the other hand, are somewhat more refined, a little bit different, but I think we both balance each other out with some of that stuff. And the technology stuff, of course, is my forte. But yeah, we built this group together. We kind of just like went in on it hand in hand once we started doing the podcast together. And it's called the Military Retirement Group. We are sitting at 2.8 thousand members, so 2,800 members.
Wow.
Really great community. The cool thing is, the same that we do with the podcast itself, because I know a lot of people like want to go out and build the YouTube channel and make it huge and get a bunch of followers and get subscribers and get to monetization really quick. And I would love to do that as well. But I also really, really enjoy the fact that the people that come and listen to the podcast, that watch the show, that are in the Facebook group, they're genuinely there because they want to be there to either look for help or offer advice and help, right? So it's really a truly highly curated community. There's no BS in there. There's no people pointing fingers and calling each other's names. There's no like animosity inside the group. It's really, really tight-knit community of folks who are genuinely concerned and want to help. And the same with the channel. I would love for it to be, 1 million subscribers, but at the same time, I'm happy with having a couple thousand who are genuinely there for what we're doing and genuinely support us. So yeah, the group is amazing. Great conversations that happen in there.
Awesome. Well, we're going to transition, John, into the second half of our podcast, and we'd love for you to participate. And what we do is we normally broadcast our podcast about every 2 weeks, but we haven't been on for over a month. But we took a break for the holidays. Some of us have been traveling and stuff, so we're back in. And what we normally do, John, at this part of the podcast is we cover some topics that have been pretty significant in the news. And we cover our perspective. And just a reminder to the listeners, we don't script this, right? Jim and I don't sit here and plan what we're going to say. So we know the topics. We talked about
we don't even know if we're going to agree with each other or not.
No, we don't.
Literally a blank piece of paper.
So what we do is we go through these topics, and there's been some pretty significant topics in the past couple of weeks. I mean, you could probably go back I think it's been 5 or 6 weeks since our last podcast, and there's been a lot of significant stuff. But we've picked some topics that we think are pretty relevant, and we'd love to chime in. And we make them very broad for a reason, right? We make the topics very broad so we can just get a perspective. So we're going to move into that section, and please feel free to jump in. So, Jim, I'm going to let you start off with what's going on in Venezuela. Give us your perspective of what's happened in Venezuela and where you think things are going.
Yeah, we captured old Maduro. That was an interesting execution. Not execution, but we captured him.
Mission is what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah. We captured him. We got him. We brought him back and all that good stuff. And then the interim president's taken over. And I've heard all kind of mixed things. I heard she's on our side. I heard she's against us. I've heard, of course, everybody in the world that thought this was a great thing 8 years ago or 4 years ago thinks this is a horrible thing that's been done. And, you got to take this with a grain of salt because they're going to hate everything he does anyway. But what were the motives? Oil, China, Russia. I mean, it's all over the map. It's still developing. We're still hearing stuff about it all the time. But I mean, the big thing is, he didn't ask congressional permission. I'm like, well, commander in chief, and you got a long list. We go through a long laundry list of presidents that have done actions like this without consent of Congress. Because really, what do you need Congress? It's an act of war. It's not an act of war. But it's still developing. He's still, we still got him. They're still without him. They're happy as can be. Half of the country here is angry about what it's the same old story. Some people are happy about it. Some people aren't, but the Democrats put a bounty on him when Biden was in office. So, I mean, why would they put a bounty on him if they didn't want him to do it? And then you've seen the things where Schumer said back in 2020, we need to remove him. And now they're saying we shouldn't have removed him, the whole flip-flop thing. So it's like, what's right, what's wrong?
John, what's your take on what's going on in Venezuela, sir?
Yeah, I mean, I'll preface everything that we talk about from here on out, at least in this section of the podcast, with the fact that you had asked about if the podcasting and the interviewing brings me some kind of solace, gives me some joy and gives me comfort and is a kind of therapeutic. I tell you what, another therapeutic thing for me is trying my best to avoid all mainstream media stuff. And unfortunately, or fortunately, I do have access to AFN and I can see it when I'm working or whatever, and I'll see it on the TVs. Every once in a while, I'll stop if they're saying something important. But for the most part, I feel like there's just this weird media crisis going on in the world right now that's really just taking the same story and just respinning it and respinning it and respinning it and respinning it and giving you the pregame and then the post game and then the post game and then the post game. So that aspect of it, I don't like. I feel like, and I don't know what the sentiment on the ground is. I wish I could get some live sentiment on the ground and get caught up on that and actually see like people streaming or whatever, posting on TikTok, talking about Venezuela who are actually in Venezuela. I've got one friend who's from Venezuela originally. Some of his family's still there, and me and him talk about it back and forth. He's not so happy about it. I think the broad overarching thing that a lot of folks may not be catching on to, the same reason why we're looking at, is it Greenland?
Yep.
Yeah.
So the same reason why we're looking at Greenland, and it's something a lot bigger than just like current events and current things going on. It's like the Trump administration, at least from my perspective, what I see is looking beyond, 2026 and looking at what are some vectors where a potential bigger threat like China or Russia or North Korea could potentially come at us with some kind of military force, right? And in that, they look at it and say, okay, well, here are some places that we need to get a foothold into, whether we do that militarily, whether we do that diplomatically. I think it just happened to fall the way it happened to fall. And I think if you've pulled a dictator out of the country to try to establish some baseline democracy, not to say democracy is the best thing on the planet, but it's pretty damn good. I think if you can help people out in that perspective, because it's going to be a long uphill battle for them to get through that and get to a new in-place leader and get things resettled again. But I feel like that's a step in the right direction, at least to help them to get that established. And if we can do that, I feel like we're doing the good job.
Awesome. We did get a comment in the chat from Navy Cop, and it says limited military action is not the same as going to war. Certain groups are focused on us being at war, yet all hostilities stopped after 3 hours of action. A lot of wild info flying around. And I concur with that, right?
Yeah.
John, you brought up a great part about mainstream media, and I don't want to just limit that mainstream media being the liberal media, right? There's the conservative media, which is also now mainstream media, right? So a lot of times it's hard to pull back what's really going on. And in my perspective on this about Venezuela is quite interesting. They were the richest nation in South America 25 years ago.
Yeah.
They were extremely rich. And when a dictator took over, you look at where that country is now, and it's a shame. And I concur with you. I'd love to see more video and action from on the ground to really get a perspective how the Venezuelan people perceive their situation. I got to agree with Jim too, right? I mean, they put a bounty, $25 million bounty on this guy during the Biden administration, and I think it was right to take action. My personal opinion, it was right to take action. However, I agree, John, with you. If you look at the influence that the Russian, the Chinese, the Iranians, Hezbollah has had on areas like Venezuela, I think it's time. I think it had to happen. And if we would have waited any longer, our ability to influence the outcome and change in that country would have been severely impacted, right? So it's a tough thing, whenever you're meddling in another country's business, right?
Yeah.
You are directly responsible for the success or failure that happens. And we've been in many countries. I mean, if you look at what's going on in Afghanistan, if you look at Iraq, right? If you look at Panama, right? We've been involved in a lot of countries, Vietnam, and we can keep on going back and on and on. So there's been positive experiences, there's been negative experiences. And I think it's too early to tell. I think we're going to have to wait a few years to see, and then we'll know whether this was the right or the wrong thing to do.
Yeah. And Navy Cop had a good point, and is kind of expanding on what I had said a little bit ago. It was a limited military action. He went in, they did it, they got out, they're done. It's not a prolonged thing. We didn't ask for a declaration of war. You know, President's commander in chief, we did a strike, we came out, we're done.
Yep, absolutely. Moving on to another country that's making the news lately is Iran. So, John, what's your perspective on what's going on in Iran today?
Yeah, so I probably have a really unique perspective that not a lot of folks have. And not to put my business out there or anything like that, but I'm comfortable with it. I mean, I'm not some kind of big internet celebrity or any nonsense like that. I actually have family lineage that goes back to Iran directly. So folks who are actually on the ground in Iran, who live there currently, are direct relatives of mine. And so I know that it's been a tense situation there for quite some time. And I know that they've been back and forth, and even starting as early as back in the 70s, right? Moving up till today. I like the fact that there's protesting on the ground, that they're trying to push back against the government to say, look, we've been under this regime for quite some time. You guys maybe or may or may not promise us X, Y, Z as you were taking power. It's been 30, 40 years. Like, what have you actually done? And I guess I think it's got influenced by, you know, the broader like social media and worldwide connectivity and people being, and that's why they shut the internet down, right? But having that outside influence is basically, they could stop it for a long time up until the point where the internet came out, and then they slowly try to blockade it. But over time, like, you're going to get access to what you're going to get access to. So they're going to get the truth on the ground of what they see with their eyes, and then they're also going to get objective truths from outside of Iran, right? And maybe some of those folks have never traveled outside of Iran. Maybe they've been in Tehran or in, you know, wherever they've been for so long, and they've never seen really what the outside world looks like. So I feel like it's a good thing. I feel like, again, I'm not saying democracy is the best thing on the planet. It's proven to have its cracks and flaws as well. But I think that from the perspective of the human race, they have a good thing going when they're trying to push back on a very oppressive government. I mean, let's be honest. And again, my bloodline is Iranian. There's people who have been lost and like kidnapped and, you know, removed from the earth in that country for whatever reasons, whether it was they just didn't like the way they were dressed, or they didn't like what they were talking about, or somebody was doing something that weren't supposed to be doing. So I think getting rid of oppressive governments, again, same in Venezuela. I see it, if you're getting rid of an oppressive government and hopefully putting a better government in place that at least puts human rights first and foremost, then I think we're doing the right thing.
Yeah, this is an interesting situation. I was a teenager in '79 when Iran was moving to a very democratized nation, and the current, regime. Well, I want to say regime, but the way they operate, they quashed it, and they've been a very controlling country and very strict in nature. For what, 45, almost 50 years, right? So the people are rising up, and it's a shame that people are being, and it's been going on since before the uprising, right? This is not the first uprising that Iran's had. There's been others, but a lot of people are dying. A lot of people are being tortured and put in jail. But I'm going to be very clear on my opinion on this, and that is, I don't want to see anybody die. I definitely think there needs to be a change in Iran. And I want us as a country, as a U.S., to be very careful of how we insert ourselves into that. And I think we need to be there to support any transition, right? But I think getting involved and preemptive strikes to help the protesters is kind of a tricky balance. It's kind of like that thing with Venezuela. We're never going to know what the results of the impacts are going to be. And the reason I say that is that, you already see Saudi Arabia shifting to become the powerhouse in the region. And I'm concerned about that. I got to be honest with you. I'm concerned because it's another country. It's another that is very strict in its way of doing business, right? And I can see them asserting control in Iran, and then everything that everybody's been doing is for naught. So it's a very tricky situation. It's going to be very interesting to see how this unfolds. I think the fact that they're absolutely in the pursuit of a nuclear weapon. This couldn't be a better time for this change to happen. And obviously, I don't have that access to the information that our government does and intelligence sources like that. But if the reality is that they're that close to producing a weapon, and who knows whether they are or not, then maybe our interdiction in helping the protesters is warranted. That's just my take on it. Jim, what about you?
Well, we don't have the greatest history within the Middle East. I mean, and to be honest, those countries have been fighting each other since recorded time, and we've not had we've been back and forth over there for for 30, 40 years now, and it's not a whole lot notable has changed. And right now, even you got the protesters going on. I understand what they want. Yeah, they need help, but I mean, once we go over to Iran, if we did anything heavy there, what's Iraq and Syria and everything around they're going to say? And the economy is tanked over there right now. It's rock bottom, so nothing's worth anything over there. And there's so many infightings and so much. I mean, it's a mess, and we've never been able to do anything to quell that. They've never been able to do anything to quell that. I mean, what is the answer? Nothing we've found so far. So I mean, it's a very, very touchy issue. How do we handle it?
It is. Yeah. That brings us into the next area of contention, right? Which is Greenland. And I'm going to start off on Greenland, right? So I get it. John, you covered that when we covered Venezuela, right? Obviously, there's concern about the influence that the Chinese and Russians and potentially North Korea, or even the Iranians, or some powerhouse may have in that country, right? It's rich in minerals, right? But it's also a sovereign territory of Denmark, right? And while I absolutely appreciate the fact that our president sees what's going on, right? I'm going to be, and I'm a fan of him. I've said this on many podcasts. I have a love-hate relationship with our president, right? I love a lot of things he does. He drives me nuts with the execution on how he executes, right? And just saying, hey, we got to have Greenland no matter what. We'll take it by force. Right now, countries are putting, troops on the ground. We got a base there. We have a small base there, and we're rushing more troops there. I think it's the wrong approach, right? I think having bilateral talks with Denmark and Greenland and explain to them, hey, we'd love to, increase our presence there, right? Grow the base, have an agreement to provide protection in return for, maybe some, access to some resources, right? To protect what they have and everything. I think that's a better way. I just don't agree with the way we're approaching this, right? To me, it's an embarrassment, right? And I agree there's issues with NATO and the amounts we pay, but there's just, to me, diplomatically, it's just the wrong way to approach this. And I tell people all the time, I says, don't pay attention to what the president says, pay attention to what the president does, right? Because a lot of times what he says and what he does are two different things. So I think it's a bunch of song and dance. I don't think we're going to take Greenland by force. And if we do, I would 100% renounce that, right? And be dead set against that, right? Because it's not the way as the country we are and what we stand for that we should do business. So just my take. Jim, what about you?
I agree. First of all, what you said, don't watch what he says, watch what he does. Because, he'll ask for the moon and stars, knowing he'll get bargained down to this. That's his strategy. It's always been a strategy. I don't believe we should take a sovereign country by force. Absolutely not. I will stand by that. I support most everything he does, but I don't. If he wants to negotiate, increase our presence, work with Denmark to do some unilateral, beneficial thing for both, that's great. taking it by force, I would vehemently disagree with that.
Yeah. John, what's your take?
Yeah, I mean, I'm wondering in the circling all this, because we've seen this also, up north in the Ukraine as well, where you've got this kind of thing going on, and it's totally not the same thing, but I'm just trying to connect it together because of the fact that at some point or at some points, while this Ukraine conflict has been going on with Russia, it feels like there were times where the NATO and the UN was like, hey, you should come and hang out with us, or maybe not come hang out with us. There was always kind of this push and pull of whether they're going to join NATO or not join NATO. I believe that Greenland falls under NATO responsibility,
Yes.
just by virtue of who they're attached to. I'm wondering if this is going to force somebody to say, okay, well, yeah, it's great, and NATO allies with the US, and the US is trying to come over and take over this sovereign territory of Greenland. Maybe it's time. Maybe this is the catalyst that we need to be able to break off and get our independence and become an independent sovereign nation, completely out of NATO's scope and completely out of the US scope, so that they can intentionally put up the barricade or draw the line in the sand and say, look, okay, so now we've taken this step and now we're completely independent. We don't belong to any other countries. We're an independent nation, and now we can make our own decisions on our own with our own parliament. I'm wondering if that's going to be one of those things that kind of pushes it over the edge a little bit so they can then take that action. But I'm just speculating at this point. I really don't know. But yeah, it's another one of those things where if you look at it from the media perspective, is like, are we going there for the resources of the country, or are we going there to actually protect the best interests of the United States against enemies, foreign enemies, or is it a combination of those two things? And what is the real bottom line truth? And again, like you said, you can listen to Trump all day. I have these conversations with my wife's family all the time because they're always asking me, like, what do you think of Trump? And why did you vote for Trump? And I'm like, look, it's complicated. Because they really want to know. And a lot of times I'm just like, whatever. He's doing some work. He's actually taking action. That's the thing that strikes me the most out of all of it, beyond the fact that he's the commander in chief. And as a United States citizen, as a former U.S. military member, as a current military civilian, like, that's my stance. He's the commander in chief. You do what he says. Like, he's the boss, and he's not giving out any kind of crazy orders to anybody. So, but yeah, he's definitely taking actions where most people would just talk and have litigations and talk in Congress and the House and the Senate and try to figure out what we're going to do for 4 years and then not take any actions. I'd rather somebody take actions and sometimes take a misstep and take a few wrong actions, whether it happens to be Greenland or Venezuela or anywhere else. At least you're doing something and not just talking.
100%.
Yep.
All right. Now we're going to get into the good, juicy stuff. The benefits fraud, right? Oh my God. Jim, I'm gonna let you lead us off on this, right? And I'm gonna let you take it wherever you want to go. I'm trying to look at this more from a
strategic Minneapolis and all that, Minnesota.
Yeah, so I mean, we're talking Minnesota, but I think it's much larger than Minnesota. But I'm gonna let you take it wherever you want to.
It's like the staging area,
Yeah.
It kills me though. It kind of goes back to the same thing. Everybody says they want government fraud done. We had this similar discussion when we were talking about Doge. Everybody wants, the fraud to be found. Everybody wants it to stop. But then, depending on who's doing it, Elon Musk, Trump, now it's a bad thing. It's like, no, we don't. If you're walking up to these daycares ran by Somali immigrants and there's no children there, hello. And they're finding this, they're finding that, they're uncovering all this evidence of fraud. I mean, I've never hated a person so much that I don't want him to do good things. You know what I'm saying? So it don't matter who does it. If Biden found this, I'd be applauding Biden for finding it. But he didn't do anything. But that is, like you mentioned, the stage. It's just a staging ground. It's just it's everywhere. But for whatever reason, and I think it's the whole Tim Walz thing. He was running for vice president. You're going to run for vice president, and while you're hiding and committing all this fraud, right out in the open. And it's just it's terrible. And I mean, if we can recover this money, or we can stop this from happening, I don't understand what the big problem is. Now you got the protests over there, which is a result of all this. Which again, why is this a problem? You got your illegal immigrants over there. You got your criminals committing fraud. But people are upset about it. You're upset about us finding them wasting your tax dollars. I can't calculate that. But I think what he's doing here is he's going to use this, as I said before, a staging ground for doing it in other cities. And I like finding fraud and stopping it, because I mean that's our hard-earned money. That's our tax dollars. That should be going to benefit programs that people actually need, retirees, disabled folks. Hell, you and I, when we're out of work for 6 months, you know what I mean? But if all this money is going, to these people that they're shipping home, what was it? The $72 billion shipped back to home countries last year. Someone said that, I can't remember where, but even if my number's wrong, you get the idea. All this money is going back to other countries, and we're supposed to be getting benefits from it. And benefits in that regard is more encompassing, better roadways, more civil service people, more the services that you can get, your schools, your health centers, whatever. It's taken away from all of this, and because of who's stopping it, it's a problem. I just stop it. I don't care who stops it. I don't have a problem.
Yeah, John, what's your thoughts on that?
I mean, I feel like it feels like it's part of a broader thing about protecting our borders, and it just happens to fall in line with that same kind of thing that's going on. At least that's what it feels like. And again, like I said, I don't follow current events like that. I mean, I Google it if I need to really understand what's going on. It usually comes across on X as some kind of post from somebody, or on LinkedIn as some kind of post from somebody. That's where I get my news from. So that I let it boil to the top, but it feels like it's a broader thing of trying to protect the borders and trying to police things up, and trying to, again, we enacted Doge at the beginning of the president's term to try to figure out and weed out some of this fraud, waste, and abuse. And even in the efforts of Doge in the federal government, like that, I think they only uncovered a small fraction of a percentage of what's actually happening, right? That was actually able to be actioned and taken care of, and somebody putting some foot down and saying, okay, we're going to stop this. But a lot of that stuff has been mitigated to the point where you're not going to see it, or they've veiled it in some way, or whatever. So yeah, shipping any kind of taxpayer money outside of the country, like I think that goes to the whole point of like protect our borders, keep everything in the U.S., bring jobs and bring prosperity back to the United States, where we're trying to rebuild things and remain a superpower, as China in the backdrop has become the number one manufacturing country in the whole entire globe, just by virtue of figuring things out, re-engineering things, reverse engineering things, and doing it better and faster and a lot quicker, right? So yeah, that's what I feel about it.
That's interesting, and I like both your perspectives. And a lot of times I see, before we start giving Congress more money, they should start accounting for where the money that we're currently giving them is being spent.
Absolutely.
And so while we've started in Minnesota, I think Minnesota is just the tip of the iceberg, right? And while obviously there's a focus on the Somali population, and we'll cover a little bit of that when we talk about our next topic, right? I'm sure that this fraud exists it's far more reaching than just the Somali community in Minnesota, right?
Oh, yeah.
People have been playing the game, people have been riding the game, and there's really been lack of oversight, right? And I think that's the problem, right? And we've all worked for the government, right? And the government, for every dollar, if you work for the government, for every dollar we spend $5 in oversight to make sure it gets spent right. And I think what's happening at the state level is they probably haven't been putting enough oversight in how the money's being spent to make sure it's legit, right? So I'm definitely for weeding out the fraud, right? Holy cow. It goes on. It's abusive. And if we could get a hold of that right? And it's probably a whole nother subject we can cover about the ACA, right? The American Care Act and stuff, right? We're trying to fund that. Well, let's find the fraud so we can fund healthcare for folks that really, really need it, right? I mean, this is just ridiculous. And I'm sure if we looked across the 50 states and peeled back the onion on this, and I think California and New York are next in the line of fire. Why? Because of Newsom, because of Mondami, because of Hochul and stuff, right? And the political warmongering that goes on. But I think if we look in all states, right? I think we're going to find out that this is a huge issue, and there's potentially billions and billions of dollars on the line that we got to get a hold of and get control of. Right? We have a debt in this country that is unsurmountable, that we are passing down to our kids, that we got to get control of. And this is how we do it. We get a hold of the fraud and stop this nonsense. We're never going to be able to stop it all, right? So you don't want it to be a point where we stop people from getting benefits that truly need them, right? But I think we really got to get to a point where there's a happy medium, right? Where's that return on investment? I just, it's sickening what's going on with the level of fraud. And if this is just a couple of billions of dollars in Minnesota, imagine across all 50 states how much money we're talking.
Yeah,
exactly.
If you just one city from each state, that's 50 times what's going on.
Yes, sir.
And
some states are bigger than others. So, just think about it. Crazy. All right. And definitely related, ICE enforcement, right? There's been a lot going on with ICE enforcement, especially in Minnesota, but it's been going on in other states too. And there's been a lot of things said in Philadelphia. John, what's your take on what's going on with the ICE enforcement?
Yeah, luckily, I get a really unique perspective being outside of the United States for so long. So many, I mean, you spent a lot of time in Europe as well. But being out of the States for so long and then going back and looking at the things going on, again, it's basically just trying to secure our borders. And I think ICE enforcement is one way of trying to do that. How they're actually executing that action may or may not be. I do, what I don't want it to do is I don't want it to turn into a police state. That's what I would really not like to see. I think that would be a catastrophic failure for the United States government and for the United States people. But there's ways to do it, and there's ways to not. And I wish really that the U.S. government would take some hints from like European countries who are actively taking care of immigration laws and how they bring people to their country and how they do citizenship and all those naturalization, all those things that they do here in Europe. It seems like they've got it figured out a little bit better. And again, not perfect. There's still, boats that come from North Africa that fly past Sicily going up into Italy, right? There's people migrating in through Eastern Europe, coming into places like Germany and France and all those places. So they don't have it perfect. But at least I've got it to the point where every single person who's in the country basically has access to a lot of resources like healthcare and things like that. And in order to get those resources, you need to have the proper credentials to get those resources. So I think by virtue of having that kind of symbiotic relationship between the resources and the credentialing, I think you could solve a ton of issues in the United States across the board without having to go around and do raids on people and try to do all these kind of militaristic acts of force. I just don't want it to turn into a police state. That's what I don't want to see. And I hope we don't get to that point.
No, I agree with you. Right. Yeah. And it's definitely concerning. So I just want to cover a couple of perspectives on this, right? ICE is out there. They're doing the job, right? If you're an ICE agent, right, I wouldn't want to be in your shoes, right? Number one, right? However, when you're going into neighborhoods where, and I'm not talking about necessarily what happened with Renee, but I'm talking in general, right? I think when you go into these neighborhoods, and I had a great talk with my youngest son, who's 21 years old, about this, and we didn't agree on it, but there's one place that him and I agree 100%. De-escalate to the best of your ability, right? We need the ICE agents to de-escalate to the best of their ability. However, we've talked about on this podcast a lot of time, I am okay with people protesting. I am okay. But when you are hindering law enforcement operations, whether you agree with them or not, then it's the wrong answer. It's the wrong answer. You cannot hinder whether you like it or not. Protest, yes. Do not hinder law enforcement operations. ICE is a law enforcement arm. It's a federal arm. Stop it. Stop doing it, right? And I got to be honest with you. It's tough. The other thing about ICE enforcement that I am adamant about is it shouldn't be a general sweep just looking for people, right? It should be targeted against people that they know. They should be going after certain people they're looking for, which I believe they are in most part doing. I don't know that to be true, but I guess that's what I want to believe. I want to believe that when they're going out there, they have specific people in mind that they're going to round up, right? And get those people with criminal history and background that are here illegally out of the country. That is what I think the focus is. That's what I signed up for. When I voted for President Trump, that's what I focused on. Get the criminals, illegal immigrants that are criminals out of this country. Focus on that first, right? The last point I have on this is it's amazing if you go back and look at videos that are available of interviews with ICE enforcement agents when Obama was in office, right? Reporters were going with and interviewing, and people were for removal of illegal immigrants, and so yeah, and so I think we got to do it. I think again, focusing on the criminals first, right? Because we have a bunch of them here, and we know who they are, and that should be the target, 100% the target, not a general sweep. That's just Kevin's perspective on it. Jim, what's your take?
Well, you hit the nail on the head. Back when Obama was in and they were interviewing ICE agents, it's not what's being done. It is dead on 110% who's doing it. That's the problem. It's weird. I don't understand it, but that's exactly the problem. But they got things going on now where ICE aren't really law enforcement agents. Well, how are they not? And it's like, well, if they identify as law enforcement agents, that'll be good enough. We can play that card. You know what I mean? But how are they not agents? And, I don't want anybody hurt. I don't want anybody killed. I don't want any loss of life. But we're all parents here. What happens if you step away from your house for a month and let your kids run crazy, then come back and try to restore order? What's going to happen? It's going to be chaos. And you're going to have to lay a firm hand to get your house back in order. That's what's going on right now. Now, I agree, John. I don't want a state like you're talking about either. I don't want that kind of lockdown. I don't want that kind of, and I've even said it before. I don't want that kind of thing to happen. If he does something like I was talking about, if he does something, he goes into the city, restores order, he better pull them back out and return control to that area. That's why I have an eye watching on that. When he doesn't pull back out, and I've referred back to Rome, when the Roman army marched into Rome for the first time ever, no problem. Make sure when the order is restored, you march them back out.
Yep.
But these people, they're acting exactly like spoiled children. They've been out of control for so long. Nobody reining them in. We didn't keep our due diligence. We didn't keep a pattern of how we did things. We just stopped doing things, and then people can now go out there and they think that they have no consequences for their action. There's no accountability anymore.
Yep.
And you see people now, the couple of folks in those riots, welts and the lost an eye from a rubber bullet. It's like, it was a rubber bullet. You're here to talk about it. Okay. If you're going to accost law enforcement, I don't care who they are. If you're going to attack them with your car, you don't even need to be an ICE agent or a law enforcement agent at all. If you attack somebody with a deadly weapon, such as your vehicle, that person has the right to defend themselves. The fact that they're an armed federal agent just makes you, I won't use the word, but it's not a smart thing to do.
And we got a comment from Navy Cop. I just want to jump in there, Jim. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but she said even CNN has embedded a couple of reporters, and they are specifically going after specific targets but they
Yeah.
also said that if there are other illegals nearby, then they will sweep them up as well.
That is fine. Yeah, I'm good with that. Thanks, Navy cop. That's another point I was going to make is if they are targeting specific things and they happen to find another 20 illegals around them, sure, grab them. But
Yeah, my
showing
only issue with that, Jim, is how do you know they're illegal? Are you saying they're illegal because they're Mexican? I'm just asking the question because they're Somali. I mean, how do you know, right? How do you know?
You'd have to.
That's my issue.
You'd have to run the check on them, of course. I've had the check run on me because I wasn't born in the United States.
Sure.
I think I talked about this before. There was something that happened to me 20, 30 years ago, and everybody that was involved got processed and got released. I had to stay hours and hours and hours because they had to bring an ICE agent in, immigration agent in, to interview me to make sure I was legally in this country. Did it tick me off? Yeah, but I understand it, from a sensible point of view. So yeah, I've been there, Yeah. The moment he checked my stuff, he knew I was good, but I had to wait all that time to make sure I was cleared.
Yeah.
That's the rub that a lot of my friends, like I mentioned, one of my friends is from Venezuela. I've got friends from many various different countries all over the place, especially now living in Europe. I'm interacting with a lot more people. Again, my bloodline comes from a place where it's not so popular in the American eyeballs, but again, it goes back to that whole like credentialing thing. Like, yes, we should do. I think it's not so much like, do we do this or do we do that? I think it's yes, we should do both. Yes, we should start enforcing illegal aliens within the borders of the United States, and also let's pour some money, let's pour some resources into actually fixing the credentialing system and making it universal across the board so that every single American citizen has a card. And if they don't have that card, they should come with the understanding that here's your card. If you don't keep this card on you at all times, you can be detained and or put in jail or whatever the case may be. So just keep the damn card on you at all times. And I think you would figure out a lot of things by doing that.
Yeah. Well, the problem with that is you're going to have these states like California, New York. They're going to just start handing them these cards. Then here's your card. Keep that card, because they're issuing them driver's licenses.
No.
There have even been law enforcement agents that have been illegal. So they're packed with credentials. I mean, if you got half your governing bodies in the country not adhering to laws and actively bypassing those laws, I mean, what can you do?
Yeah.
Well, a good point. It's a really good point. And it's interesting because without getting into the details, right, those sanctuary cities out there, right, in sanctuary state, New Jersey about to become the first sanctuary state, right, they want to enforce their own laws. But if you talk about cutting federal funds, right, they cry bloody murder. And so you can't have your cake and eat it too, right? You can't have your cake and eat it too. Yep. So
absolutely.
Yeah, I think we could probably do a podcast just on, I think we've done one already on immigration, and we've talked about voting and having ID, and it's amazing how all these subjects we covered, Jim, just come back around.
Yeah, and I mean, we've used the federal funding threats before. Back when we wanted everybody to raise the drinking age, back when we wanted to lower the speed limits, we've always used that federal funding threat.
100%.
This isn't new.
This isn't new, right? All right, last subject. It's a subject near and dear to me, right? And I want to talk about this because we talked about mainstream media earlier, right? And here's the deal. John Harbaugh is going to probably be the next head coach of the New York Giants. And everybody's saying that he is the head coach. Well, guess what? They haven't signed the deal yet. They're still working through the deal. So it just shows you mainstream media love to say he's the coach. Well, they've agreed in principle, but it's not signed. It's not a done deal, right? Classic spin of the media on this subject, right? Classic spin. Let me tell you, I'm a New York Giants fan. Everybody knows I'm a New York Giants fan, been my whole life. And I'm excited to have John Harbaugh as the New York Giants head coach, because since Tom Coughlin left, it's been a revolving door for the New York Giants. So I'm glad that John Harbaugh hopefully will become the next coach of the New York Giants. right? We've needed a guy like him. And when the Baltimore Ravens fired him after 18 years, if you look on my Facebook page and look when I posted that, we should hire John Harbaugh immediately. You can see it's like almost flash to bang. And I really, let me tell you, I thought Joe Shane would screw this up. I really thought he would screw this up, and John Harbaugh would be like, yeah, I'd love to come to the Giants, but Joe Shane's got too much control on the reins. Well, I mean, they're giving John Harbaugh everything he wants, and there's some operational stuff, right, that happens behind the scenes. I'm sure it has to do with draft selections and making decisions on some stuff that we're not privy to, not being involved in football. But I'm excited. I haven't been this excited about the New York Giants since they won the Super Bowl in 2012. This is a great story for the New York Giants. It's a great story for John Harbaugh, who had a long tenured career, 18 years at the Baltimore Ravens, right? There's so many other coaching vacancies available, right? Oh my God. I mean, it's like a revolving door this year. We don't know where anybody's going to end up. So, Jim, I know you don't care about the New York Giants and professional football, but I'd be interested on your take on some of the stuff I covered.
Well, I think I've got him mixed up with Jim Harbaugh, who was the head coach for Michigan. And you know how I feel about Michigan.
Yes, sir.
But I honestly do not know enough about this gentleman to even, I'm not going to muddy the waters because I don't know anything about it.
Awesome. That's okay. John, any comments on John Harbaugh?
Also have absolutely no knowledge about anything we're talking about at this particular. I will ask this question. I do have a question though, because I've scanned now through the Googles and through some of these news reels about what's going on just to get myself a little bit up to speed. Is he entertaining any other deals from any other teams? Like it sounds like he's a free agent at this point, right?
He is, and I think that there's other teams. He hasn't gone and interviewed, as far as I know, with any other team. And I know, let me tell you, there were teams chomping at the bit to get him, right? Miami was looking at him. I mean, there's a whole bunch. I mean, there's a whole bunch of teams that would love to have John Harbaugh as their head coach. And I think even Atlanta. I think I saw some snickering from Atlanta, pissed off that the New York Giants got him. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there are some talks going on. And other teams say, hey, if you haven't signed the deal yet, we'll sweeten the deal. So I'm hoping, like I said, that's why I'm a little frustrated, because I allowed myself to get wrapped up in the mainstream media thinking this was a done deal. And I realized yesterday it is not a done deal. It's not signed. It is a deal in principle, but not 100% committed. Right. And that's what pisses me off. That I allowed myself to get wrapped up in the excitement of it. And that's just a great example of what goes on with mainstream media. We hear things and we get emotionally connected, and then we believe it to be so. That's why we started. This is why Jim and I started this podcast, right? Mm-hmm. Communication, not fabrication. Right, Jim?
That's right.
So interesting.
Well, in a couple of weeks, we're going to do our next podcast. In 2 weeks, I think we're ready to do our next podcast. I've talked to Jim about it, right? For those of you who don't know, my father passed away in November, and I've been dealing with the fallout of that. But what we want to cover is having a plan for your digital footprint, right? Having a succession plan when you leave this earth. I have gone through an experience that is pretty traumatic, and trying to figure out all the pieces, right? It's bad enough to do it on the physical side, but on the virtual side, it has been a roller coaster ride the last, I guess, 2 months, almost 2 months, right? And so I think what we want to cover is helping people realize how important it is to have all the accounts you have online and passwords. And oh, by the way, the challenge questions, if you don't, and we'll get into all the details with that, right? And knowing everywhere that your family has to go look of where you've left the breadcrumb trail. And it's an important topic. It's such an important topic today when we are all digitally connected. So I hope people will join us in 2 weeks. We'll put out a time and date. What I've noticed is, Jim, I don't know if it's because we're blessed with having John McConnell on our podcast, or the time we did it, but we've had some pretty good, steady viewership through this podcast, and we've been going for an hour and 15 minutes. So I think this might be the sweet spot, Jim, for hosting our podcast at this time.
I'm good with it.
Awesome. So join us in 2 weeks at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, 12 Central, for our next podcast about your digital breadcrumb trail and how important it is to the family. Well, Jim, I think we've covered the whole gamut.
Yep, we have indeed.
Awesome. Well, I'm Kevin.
I'm Jim.
And we are
the Signal Brothers.
Thanks, folks, for joining. Have a great one.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, John.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, everybody.